Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, station manager for Manatee Educational Television, and on this edition of Up Close, we're going to take a look at one of the key areas in the world today, and that's the state of Israel and the Middle East. Almost 65 years ago, in 1948, the state of Israel was born, and almost immediately was attacked by the Arab League. And throughout its 65-year history, Israel has had to defend itself from attacks from all sides. And yet, during this tumultuous 65-year history, Israel has persevered and developed into the area's best economy and succeeded in being a nation that has contributed to the world in a wide variety of ways. However, in recent events, Israel now faces another set of challenges, and we're here today to discuss that with a very distinguished panel. Let me introduce them now. First of all, joining us is Rabbi Howard A. Simon, chairman of the Robert and Esther Heller Israel Advocacy Initiative Committee of the Jewish Federation of Sarasota and Manatee. Rabbi, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here.
And tell us a little bit about your background, if you could.
Born in Iowa, Davenport, Iowa, where we lived for 10 years, and then for a variety of reasons, my family moved to Denver, grew up in Denver, attended Colorado University, and upon graduation from the university, I went to the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in Cincinnati, where I spent 5 years preparing for the rabbinate and was ordained and have been serving congregations and communities ever since that ordination.
And we're very happy to have you here today and to hear your perspective on some of these key issues that are facing us. Next joining us is Orna Nissan, who is the director of the Holocaust and Israel programs for the Jewish Federation of Sarasota and Manatee. Orna, thank you again it's good to see you again, and thank you for joining us. And tell us a little bit about your position with the Jewish Federation.
So first of all, shalom.
Shalom.
And it's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for inviting me for the second time to be part of this program. This is my 6th year being at the Jewish Federation. My focus is Holocaust education and Israeli program. I'm very proud to be part of the Federation, and I'm looking forward to continue with my work at the Federation and in Sarasota.
And we want to hear all about the programs and services that you offer as well, because I think that's a key component of education, is a key component of outreach to a community.
Correct. The programs that I'm in charge on are programs that are geared towards Holocaust survivors. One of the programs that we do every year is a program that is called Holocaust Survivors Luncheon. We get together with the survivors, their spouses, and members of the community to celebrate life. We do that during the holidays. In this case, we do it during the Hanukkah holiday. And we allow the survivors to come together and light the menorah and celebrate life. In addition, 5 years ago, we formed a group of children of survivors. We call ourselves, and I'm one of them, and we call ourselves the Generation After group. This is a group, as I said, of children of survivors. We meet on a monthly basis for educational purposes. The mission for the group is to actually continue the legacy of the survivors, go to schools, churches, communities, and talk about their parents' experiences.
I think that's fascinating, and I think that's something that we would be very interested in finding more about, and why it's so important to have that type of education. Orna, thank you for being here today. Joining us next is Pastor Kelvin Lumpkin. Pastor, thank you. We recognize you from being in the community and being involved in so many different things. And I think it's really important today to have you here, sir, to talk from a Christian perspective about the issues that are facing the state of Israel.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and I'm glad to be here. I'm a lifelong resident of Sarasota, senior pastor of Light of the World International Church in Sarasota, candidate for a Sarasota City Commission, maybe that's another show, and a proud supporter of Israel, and I'm glad to be here.
And I think it's really important to get your perspective on some of these issues, because I think a lot of people may misunderstand some things, and I think that's very important to be here.
Great, I'm glad to
Welcome.
be here. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, we're joined by Mr. Rich Bergman, who is the Director of Major Gifts and Community Building for the Jewish Federation of Sarasota and Manatee. Mr. Bergman, I can't tell you what a great privilege and honor it is to have you here again.
Thank you, Charles.
Not only do you have a great perspective, but a great in-depth knowledge about some of the issues that are facing the state of Israel.
Thank you, Charles.
And you're involved in a great many things in this community, I'm sure, as everybody who's watching will recognize.
I am. My first love certainly is Israel and Federation, but I'm a 14-year cancer survivor, so I'm involved in Center for Building Hope. I was a founder of Embracing Our Differences, which is a wonderful project to fight prejudice. I've been helping with Child Protection Center for abused and abandoned children, so I'm a pretty busy guy sometimes.
And what do you do in your spare time there, Richard? Do you have any spare time?
Well, I'm a happily married man with a beautiful wife and wonderful children and grandchildren. So.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being here, but the issue that we're facing today is a serious one. The state of Israel is moving into its 65th anniversary, and which is a significant achievement. However, there are challenges that are facing. And Rabbi Simon, I'd like for you to take a moment and talk about what those challenges are and how they're going to impact the state of Israel. And right off the bat, we can tell, the Gaza situation has just calmed down for the time being, but there are other situations that will be affecting Israel. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. In fact, as you indicated, Israel is looking forward to celebrating its 65th anniversary. The reality is she is as threatened or more threatened today, 65 years after her coming into modern existence, than she was in 1948 when the entire Arab world attacked her. We are living in a time of great change in the Middle East, changing so much that we can hardly keep up with it. But the realities are for Israel, and it's very, very important for us to realize this isn't just affecting Israel. The realities affect each and every one of us here in the United States and throughout the world. You've got Syria that is in the
turmoil.
midst of the worst civil war that we've seen in ages. Over 40,000 people have been killed, and on a daily basis, more and more are attacked, are killed, are maimed. It's a terrible situation that now sees a solution that we don't know how it will end up and how it will develop, but the problem is there. We also have next door to Israel, Egypt, that is under Morsi, the leader of Egypt, trying to reestablish itself as a post-Mubarak government, and yet he's having great deals of trouble. His wish to take on total power and ruling over the courts has stimulated again riots in the square. People are now in the midst of a two-pronged election. Who knows whether that constitution is going to pass or not, or whether the votes are going to be legitimately counted or not. So we stand at a problem with Egypt. We stand at a problem with the West Bank as Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the West Bank, now wishes to become a recognized state of sorts by the United Nations that has recently taken place, ignoring the reality that if you want to become a state, then you have to deal with your neighbor. You have to deal with Israel. This is what he is trying not to do. And of course, as you mentioned, Gaza, currently quiet. I can't guarantee that that quiet is going to last, or that the rockets that are fired out of Gaza are not going to again be aimed at Tel Aviv, aimed at Jerusalem, aimed at Sderot. So it's a very, very volatile area, and Israel has to be looking all around itself. There's no place that she can look to find total comfort and at ease. So she has to be.
And one of the interesting points, and I would like everybody to comment on it. During the I think it was defined as the Arab Spring. One had to feel some sense of optimism because of the throwing out of despots, if you will, in Egypt and other places. However, that Arab Spring has not really materialized into that sense of democracy. It's more of like kind of more of the same. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. And Rich, you tell us.
Well, I think that people that thought there was going to be an Arab Spring were a little naive. And I don't want to. My grandfather used to say, "Your best eyelashes are on your tochas." It means hindsight is 20/20. But the truth of the matter is, if you talk to many scholars and political scientists who studied the Middle East, they knew that this was not going to be an Arab Spring. Mm-hmm. For example, our administration naively said that we're going to deal with the Muslim Brotherhood of Egypt because they're peace-loving and nonviolent, and that they said that 75% of the people in Tahrir Square were going to were lovers of democracy. And of course, we all knew that wasn't true. So when they had that election, what happened? 45% of the people that were Muslim Brotherhood, 25% were Salafist, which are much more extreme than Muslim Brotherhood, and only 15% were, as you say, students, people in favor of democracy, et cetera, like that. So a lot of us were not at all surprised that this is an Arab winter, not an Arab spring. And also to add to what you were saying, Rabbi, Turkey and Libya and Lebanon, poor Lebanon. I've been to Lebanon a number of times. What a beautiful country, and it's really getting ruined by Hezbollah and what's happening there.
And I want to go into Hamas and Hezbollah and talk about, not only their political but their military makeup. But I want to give Pastor Lumpkin opportunity here. From a Christian point of view, as you look into what a good ally and a good friend Israel has been to the United States over the years, and you see this turmoil happening throughout the world. I mean, what is your reaction? How do you feel this is impacting our relations with the rest of the world?
And I just want to, I'll speak to that, and I want to add on something that Rich said. During the so-called Arab Spring, I was very pessimistic as well, like some others. I had concerns that Islamists would hijack the spring, which I think is happening, and we would get governments that would be even more hostile to Israel. And I think we're starting to see that now with the Muslim Brotherhood rising to power in Egypt. They're a prettier face, but their ideological cousins in Gaza do their dirty work. And so I don't think we should be deceived or take any comfort in the Muslim Brotherhood's rise to power. And we've seen President Morsi trying to grab power. And I don't think we should deceive ourselves. The aim of radical Islam is the same, whether it's in Egypt or Libya or Lebanon, and that's to establish a Muslim worldwide government to be even hostile to Israel. And so I was very pessimistic, and I was hoping I was going to be wrong, but it seems that some of my fears are coming to pass. But of course, my Christian faith is the basis of my support for Israel. But even as an American and a lover of democracy, I have to support Israel. So even if I wasn't a Christian, I would be a supporter of Israel. And so I'm concerned with the events of the world because Israel, to me, is a stabilizer in that part. Well, not just in the Middle East, but I think in
Throughout the
every
world?
part of the world, just like us. And I believe that Israel is our greatest ally. I often hear people say, one of our greatest allies. That's my opinion. I believe Israel is our greatest ally. They protect the freedom of speech, and that's important. And there's no coincidence that the economy of Israel is thriving, because wherever there's freedom and people can express themselves without fear, the economy is going to be, a strong economy is going to be the byproduct of that. And so I'm concerned, just like my friends, about Israel's safety and security. But yet still I have confidence in Israel, because in spite of Israel in its modern state, and this is the 65th, going to be the 65th anniversary of Israel's modern state, but Israel has had a presence there for thousands of years.
Exactly.
And that's one of the biggest lies that some Islamists, especially Ahmadinejad in Iran, has tried to suggest, that Israel has no presence there, but we don't pay any attention to what he says. But Israel is strong and continues to meet every challenge, and I'm confident, even I'm concerned, but still confident, that Israel is going to rise to the challenge and continue to be strong. And our government, and that's why it's so important who's going to be next Secretary of Defense. We need someone who's going to be a supporter of Israel, because they're our best friend in the world.
And there's an interesting point that you raised. Israel has risen to every challenge. As I mentioned briefly in my opening remarks, the day after, I believe, that the state of Israel was declared, the entire Arab League attacked Israel. And subsequently, each war, each crisis that befalls Israel, they've risen to that challenge. Rabbi, now it's more of a worldview, of political massaging, if you will, because the Arab presence is creating a more of a presence within the world community. Do you follow what I'm saying here? We're talking about just recently at the when doing the Gaza thing, the Egyptian president was given credit for kind of taking it down a notch over there. Is the Arab presence having, an effect on world opinion?
Absolutely. I think that President Morsi has attempted to present himself as the negotiator par excellence. He didn't stop the war. He didn't stop the attacks. The attack of the rocketry that was coming out of Gaza was stopped by Israel. And by the threat of Israel's moving in with its IDF, its armed forces, moving into Gaza, and that was a great fear, and that was what stopped it. But the world looks at this and says, well, Mubarak is gone, so Morsi must be good. They don't see the realities as Pastor Lumpkin has indicated, that we have traded one problem for an even greater problem. The situation that has taken place after Gaza, that everything stopped, then the head of Gaza, Ismail Haniyeh, comes to Gaza. By the way, comes to Gaza for the first time. He'd been staying in Lebanon, he'd been staying in Syria, comes to Gaza and says, all of the area, meaning Israel, all of the area is going to belong to the Palestinians. So he's not looking to make peace. But one from outside looks at this and says, well, maybe this is correct. Maybe Israel has to do things. Maybe there are others who want to see things. And they don't see the whole picture as it has developed, and it continues to develop as a total threat to Israel's existence and Israel's life.
And that's the interesting point here. And and Rich and Rabbi and Orna, I want all of you to speak to this, is that throughout Israel's history, its enemies are dedicated to the destruction of Israel. not to any kind of cooperation. Now, there's been periods of time when there's been great cooperation. I think when
1973.
with the Begin and Arafat and signed, there's been periods of time, but every time that you have a leader that comes, they've always talked about the destruction of Israel. There's never been anything about what can we work on this? Is there a partial, is there some, why is that? Why is that deep-seated desire, that fear for Israel? Why do you think why do you think that materializes
One of the
from?
reasons is clearly seen in a statement made years ago by Abba Eban, who was Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. When he was talking about Yasser Arafat, who was then the head of the PLO, the head of the West Bank, and he made the statement, if there is ever a time that an Arab leader can make a mistake, he will make a mistake. Meaning, they don't think in terms of what can be best for us. For instance, if the West Bank had a relationship of a truly positive nature, if Gaza had a relationship of a truly positive nature with Israel, there is so much that Israel could do and would do for their neighbors. As Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, we can live together, we can build together. They don't want to build with a Jewish state. The ideal is get rid of that Jewish state. It was said in 1948 by the Arab world, we're going to shove you into the sea and that will end the Jewish state. It is the goal of the Muslim Brotherhood. It is the goal of Islamists. It is the goal of the countries that surround Israel, and Israel has to live with this.
And Abbas says, just a short time ago, there is no historical claim to Israel by Christians or Jews, that nothing really happened before Muhammad, which was 700 years ago. So how do you argue with that kind of reasoning? There's all kinds of great quotes. One of them, I think it was Golda Meir said, if the Arabs would lay down their arms, we would have peace, prosperity, etc. If Israel lays down their arms, there'll be no more Israel. And it's an issue, it's a problem. Orna could probably answer, she lived through this.
You have to understand that Islam, in my opinion, has been hijacked by some radical people who are just using Islam as a shield for political purposes. And Hosni Mubarak certainly doesn't deserve angel wings, but at least what makes him different from Morsi is that to some degree, they respected Israel's right to exist. But when you look at Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, they think Israel shouldn't exist. And so that's a problem. So there'll never be peace with people who feel like Israel shouldn't exist at all. And so this peace in Gaza is just surface. It's only temporary, in my opinion.
And that's a very interesting point, Norno, and get you, because I want to take a moment from all of your perspective to talk about Hamas and Hezbollah and the Muslim Brotherhood, because those have become those, and the Hamas is now the governing party in Gaza. Is that correct?
That's
I mean,
correct.
and they've they kind of differentiate because they say there's the Hamas governing body, and then they have the militant arm as well, and they're not connected. No one knows what the other's doing or what. But I'd like to hear your perspective in why, first of all, how has Hamas emerged as this governing body when, in fact, the United States and other countries around the world see it and classify it as a terrorist organization? And then the second question, let's talk a little bit about Hezbollah and where their emergence now as another force. Rabbi, who wants to take this? Mr. Burke?
Okay. You've got Hamas. Israel moved out of Gaza.
Right.
Israel took all of her people out of Gaza and left everything behind. They left their homes, they left the institutions that they built, and there could have been a beginning of something very, very constructive. What happened was the leadership of Hamas came in, those who then took over the area, leveled everything, tore down all the buildings, tore down the schools, tore down the institutions. We don't want any of that. In time, there was an election. and the Hamas leadership took over in Gaza and has been in control ever since. Israel has backed out of areas of the West Bank. That didn't prove to help anything at all. They now deal with Mahmoud Abbas and his government. Gaza and the West Bank at times are at odds with one another. At times, if it suits them both, are in favor of each other. Abbas would like to have everything joined together. I don't see that happening. And then we go to Lebanon, and you've got Hezbollah. Israel has had 2 wars with Lebanon. There could, God forbid, be a third, but we don't know, because what you have is Hezbollah and Hamas are doing the work of the Islamists who want Israel destroyed, and they're saying, okay, you're the guys that are closest, you're the ones that can cause the most trouble, you're the ones that can uproot Israel if possible. We'll support you. We'll supply you with goods. We will dig the tunnels from Egypt, and goods will come from Syria through Egypt into Gaza, and we'll take care. You do the fighting. We're not going to do the fighting, because every time they do the fighting, they lose. You do the fighting. And that's the situation that we've got today.
And in the background is Iran, as you're going to talk about.
And I want to talk about that in a moment. But and Rabbi, you raised a really fascinating point, because people in Gaza and the West Bank, very poor. They have no kind of infrastructure to it. But when they're given an opportunity, to fuel the hatred by Islamic extremists, then they're taking up arms against Israel.
One thing we have to remember in all of this, from 1948 on, up to and including today, Israel took all of the Jews out of the Arab countries who wanted to leave, right, and said, you come and you settle here in Israel. Eretz Israel is your home. We will live with you, we will build with you, and we will grow together. Not one Arab country took any of the so-called refugees who had no land on the West Bank or Gaza, took them in or even offered them citizenship. Right. They wanted them to live all of these years as quote-unquote refugees, because as you have indicated, if you want to stir up the people, and if you want to be able to ignore the realities in your land of poverty, of lack of education, of lack of jobs, then you say, it's Israel's fault. Go attack Israel. Go attack Israel.
And I think and Pastor, you had a comment.
I want to build on what Rabbi Simon says. First of all, I think these governments like Hamas, Hezbollah, Muslim Brotherhood, they've risen to power not because the people want them, but I think we can't ignore that they use threats to rise to power. They force conversions. And so they've risen to power not because people wanted them, but I believe people have been coerced. And their masters, especially Hamas, have thrown the rocks and hiding their hands. They'll put their missile batteries in residential neighborhoods.
And that's, I think, a proven thing, is that they put the rocket launchers next to homes and orphanages and hospitals or apartment buildings, and while that masks it a little bit, they know that other countries, specifically Israel, are not going to inflict damage in those areas.
And a lot of these regimes.
The important thing to remember is that Israel, when they were dealing with Gaza, Israel flew over, dropped leaflets saying, "Get out of your homes, get out of your we're going to attack, and they told them when we're going to attack."
And so what these regimes do is use Israel as a scapegoat to hide their own inefficiencies and their own abuses. That's whenever a regime is in trouble, blame Israel.
And I think that's the.
And
but
to
we're not.
Add to what the pastor is saying, it just shows us that the Israeli people seek peace. The Israeli people are, their motivation is to live in peace. And so my biggest concern is that what is the future in the Middle East if Iran is feeding the Hezbollah and the Hamas organization? What is the future of our children in Israel?
And that, Orna, if I could just pursue that for a moment with you, if I may. I mean, when we've talked to you before, you talked about your family who are survivors who lived in the area that was being attacked by rockets. You know, as a citizen, you have to feel, or in being, and your parents as well, have to feel this constant threat of what next. You know, how you can't prepare for something like that, even though you might have a shelter to run to, but you don't prepare for that. And day in and day out, of living under that cloud of perhaps when did that next rocket fly in, and I applaud the resiliency. You know, if you look back, you know, the 6-Day War, the Syrian, the Lebanon, all of those things, you have this wonderful resiliency. But after a while, this consistent attack, fear, it has an effect. I mean, the power of hope and faith is one thing, but you know that can really protect you from a barrage of rockets.
I'll tell you, and again, I'm sharing my personal story as an Israeli citizen and as a person that lived in Israel for most of my life. My parents reached the age of 75. And at this point, you know, they are pretty much pessimists regarding the future. And in a way, you know, they're with age and with problems that they're facing with their health, they are basically, you know, they gave up in a way. But they're extremely concerned about the future of their son, in other words, my brother, and the children of Israel. And so I will tell you, in my parents' case, they're pretty much pessimist, and they really think that the future doesn't hold any good things towards Israel.
And Rabbi, if I may, I want you to address that for a moment, if you may, because you know, as a spiritual leader, Orna's parents are there, and I'm sure there's thousands of other people that are there. What do you say to citizens to say, how do you continue to sustain with the threat of violence could happen at any time?
The reality for the vast majority of Israeli citizens is this is what we have to do to survive. Israel, as a Jewish state, must remain, must be there for Jews, Christians, those who are believers, those who are not believers. It needs to be, because it's the only democracy in this area. So what the Israelis say, and they've said it to me on a number of occasions, this is our life. But when it comes to what we have just recently experienced in the Gaza confrontation, when it comes to children hearing that siren go off and knowing they've got 15 seconds to get to a shelter, it can't help but have an effect on them, a most negative, profound effect upon them. And the parents want to protect them from this, but you can't. So they say, all right, we will live with this and we will go forward.
And you know, it's each generation goes through that. And I'm sure, you know, in 1948 there were parents saying, you know, I don't want my child to go through what I've gone through, and it was the same in you know, in the 67, 73, all of the things. I don't want my child or my children. I want to have a better place. But and Pastor, I like for you to address this. It's part of the thing is to endure and persevere and to overcome. And I think those, are the key elements that, you know, the Israeli state shows the world, is to preserve, endure, and to continue to overcome these challenges and each and every day.
My last trip to Israel, I met a young mother whose son has anxiety attacks because every time that alarm goes off, and they live in southern Israel, this young man has seen so many rockets come into his neighborhood, and I think he's only 6 years old. Whenever he walks into a room, he has to knock on the walls just to make sure they're strong enough, because he's fearful. And so that's just a microcosm of how many families live in fear every day. You never know when their rockets are coming. And what other country in the world has to issue gas masks to infants at the hospital? This is the fear that Israelis live in every day. But yet we can't give up, because Israel is worth fighting for. Any nation that protects the rights of its citizens to talk and to live, is worth fighting for, and the contribution of the state of Israel to the world is incalculable.
And we want to talk about
it's worth
that.
fighting for.
And we want to talk about the contributions that the state of Israel continues to do. But the one issue that I want to take a while to talk about is the one issue that's probably the biggest thing that's perhaps facing the state of Israel and perhaps the entire world. And that is the instability in Iran. During the political campaign, there was much conversation about Iran's capability to build nuclear weapons. This is indeed a threat, not only to the world, but absolutely to the region. Iran is a rogue state. It's considered to be a rogue state for many, many years. Where do you see this going? Rich, we'll start with you.
There's maybe as a prelude to this discussion on Iran, we ought to talk about the fact that radical Islam is so dangerous. And I always tell my Christian friends, and I speak at a lot of churches and stuff, Israel and the Jews are the canary in the coal mine. We're first. You guys are next. You have to realize what's happened to Christians in Mali, in northern Ethiopia, in Gaza, in Egypt. You've heard me say this, there's 88 million people in Egypt, 8 million Coptic Christians. They are at great risk right now, today. And part of it comes from Iran. Part of it comes from the leadership of Iran, many who are radical Islam, who believe that, they believe in Sharia law. Sharia law basically says if we ever controlled a country any time in history, if Islam ever controlled, they're ours forever, which means not just Israel and Jerusalem, it means Spain, Portugal, parts of Italy, all of North Africa, etc. And they believe it, and they think they're entitled to it. Iran is part of it. They want to form what is known as a caliphate. They have a saying called an ummah, which means a world nation. The problem is with that world nation, everybody in the world, in order to be peaceful, has to be radical Muslim. It's very dangerous. Ahmadinejad calls for the destruction of Israel. He's really, a lot of people think, a puppet for the religious leadership of Iran, which is very possible. And they have the Republic Guard. They are funding Hezbollah. They are funding Hamas. They are bringing the high-tech weapons into Gaza. They train people in Iran, that are terrorists. They're tied to Al-Qaeda in some cases. I mean, it's really, people underestimate what's happening. Americans in the West are so wonderful, but we're so naive. I can't even tell you how much is happening in our own country with radical Islam. There are little groups all over the United States. Federation has a fellow coming in by the name of Steve Emerson. He's a world expert on terrorism, but his specialty is terror cells in the United States. He's going to be here in February. I hope your people will listen.
Look forward. Perhaps you can have a
Iran
conversation with them.
the danger.
Well, and I agree, because no matter what the world sanctions are against Iran, Iran still has what I would consider deep pockets because of their oil money, and they can afford to fund different organizations throughout the world. And I think there were news reports that because of the rocketry that was used during the most recent Gaza, all of that technology and all of that capability came through Iran
Yes.
or Iran subsidiaries that did it. So it's a critical thing. Now, obviously, the nuclear capability that's probably on the horizon is a serious concern. Now, both the United States and other world powers have said this will not be allowed to happen. But it's got to be considered by the leaders of the state of Israel as a serious and deadly threat.
The leadership of Israel recognizes this is a life and death situation. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu said and demonstrated it best at the United Nations when he drew the red line. And he said, we cannot allow their development to get beyond this point. And what he's really saying is, if the world is not going to take them out, then we may have to. Because if things are left to be, if they are left as they are today, then the nuclear development will continue and will grow, and eventually there will be a nuclear Iran. A nuclear Iran is a threat certainly to Israel, but what we fail to realize is a nuclear Iran is a threat to the entire world, including the United States. It cannot happen. It must not happen.
They believe, quote, dying in the way of Allah is our highest hope. That's really scary. So Orna's folks are not the only Holocaust survivors, the way I look at it. We're Holocaust survivors too, and we have an obligation, those people that died, those 6 million Jews and those 5 million others who died in the Holocaust, we have an obligation to stand up to terror and to people like Iran who want to destroy us. If they get a nuclear weapon, it is going to be just a horror show for the West, and particularly for the United States and Israel. We need to stand up to them.
The Iranian regime, not the Iranian people, but the Iranian regime is the greatest ill in the world, in my opinion. They've proven that they can take a punch. They've had the most crippling sanctions ever. But they're still, in spite of those sanctions, pursuing nuclear weapons. And it proves my theory that those regimes don't really care about their people in the first place. They're letting their people suffer. Because if they get a nuclear arm, then their regime is going to be bolstered and they'll stay in power for years to come. And also, it'll start an arms race in the Middle East, which we don't want to see happen. And so I'm nervous about what may happen, but I don't think that Israel has a choice but to step in. Because if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, then like Rabbi Simon said, it's not just a threat to the state of Israel, but a threat to the United States and the whole world.
We need to convey a message to the American audience that Israel, in my opinion, cannot handle it on its own. I mean, this is really a major threat to the Israeli citizens, and in most cases, Israel was left alone to do the dirty job. But in this case, I believe that the American support, and especially the president's support, will be a tremendous help, and
if I remember
something
correctly,
essential.
And I think that's an excellent point. I think, Orna, I think you raise a wonderful point. I think, if I remember correctly, that during the presidential debates, that was probably one of the only things that Romney and Obama agreed upon is that Iran is indeed a rogue state, and they cannot be allowed to have a nuclear capability. So we're aware of that, and that's one portion of this thing. But also the financing of Hamas and Hezbollah, their underwriting of terrorist activity is also indicative of that rogue state capability of what Iran does. Because I'm sure that within the Muslim Brotherhood now that they're looking for Iran for not only dollar monetary support, but also for that philosophical support as well.
Well, in this latest conflict, we saw with the rockets coming from Gaza, they were reaching further than ever before.
That's correct.
Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, even Saddam Hussein wouldn't shoot rockets at Jerusalem. But where are they getting these rockets? And there's no doubt in my mind that the Iranian regime just uses Hamas to distract the world's attention so that they can get closer to their nuclear weapon. And so I think that we have to really wake up, like Orna said. The American public and the world needs to wake up to see what's really going on, because Iran will do anything, in my opinion, to tie up Israel's resources and attention so they can get closer to that weapon.
That's an excellent point, Pastor, and thank you for bringing that up. I want to move on for a moment, if I may, because we've talked about some very serious and critical things that are going on, and if I may say so again, Israel will continue to persevere and endure and overcome any obstacle or challenge that faces it. But I want to talk about some of those things that make Israel such a significant state in the world today, and those are its accomplishments, and they're myriad and they're extensive. And I'd like to take a few moments to shine a light on that. And one of the things, and Rich, if you could talk about this. We're all from Florida. It's a beautiful state, a lot of sunshine, but we don't lead the world in solar energy. The state of Israel does. in solar energy and solar research, Israel is many, many years in the thing, and is looking to send that technology around the world.
You know, Israel is the most amazing little country in the world. So 7 million people, roughly 6 million Jews. They are the second number of IPOs on NASDAQ. They have the highest percentage of college graduates in the world, the highest percentage of PhDs in the world. They are the leaders in medicine. You know, my wife's a radiologist. Now you can take a pill with a camera in it, developed in Israel, and you don't have to drink all that horrible stuff. It takes a picture going all the way down. They just discovered something with breast cancer this week, that they can freeze tumors in a special way, and they were able to kill tumors in breast cancer. It may also be good for kidney cancer. A Christian Israeli just developed a product. You know, like you go into a doctor's office and take your blood pressure, and he does all that. In 3 years, you're going to be breathing into a little machine, and it's going to detect whether or not you have cancer. It came from the idea that certain dogs can sniff cancer. They're the leaders, as you say, in solar energy, in irrigation. They develop products for...
Well, talk a little bit about irrigation, because to me that's a fascinating. Israel, most part, it's desert land. And they have made it bloom, because not only have they created ways and new and unique technologies for irrigation, but they've really transformed the environment.
You want me to take it, Orna? You want to talk about it?
Orna, you want to talk a little bit about?
No, you talk about it.
When you fly over to Israel, they used to call it it's like a pattern of green. You see the desert on all the sides, and you see how Israel took these sand dunes and desert. I mean, Tel Aviv were sand dunes originally. It's incredible, and the irrigation is a big part of it. One of the things they have is drip irrigation. They're the first ones that ever developed. If you go to Disneyland, you'll see examples there of how they take tin foil or aluminum and put it underneath, and they have a plant growing out of the aluminum with no soil, and they just drip down. It's insane what they do in the water conservation and the desalinization plants, which are the leaders in the world. And I mean, they are developing, you know, Jews and Israelis are very humanitarian people. It's in our blood. We've been taught to be generous and help others that are less.
Give back.
We give back. In North Africa, you can't believe what they're doing. They developed a new kind of wheat that's resistant to disease. They developed new products that have vitamins inside the product, so when the kids in Africa who are starving can eat this stuff, they'll remain healthy. South Sudan, the newest country in the world, who is their #1 supporter? Israel, who trained them in irrigation and safety and helped them build a security. Israel. It's fabulous.
I would like to share also that when there was an earthquake on Haiti, the first people who came actually to save these people and help them were the Israelis, and they were able actually to build a little hospital there to care for all the injury, all the people that were injured.
I mean,
there are 19 babies named Israel and Haiti from that experience.
As well they should be. And Rabbi, you had a comment?
Well, we saw the same thing when we had the travesty of the storms on the East Coast. Israel was here.
The only country.
The only country that came here.
You know that?
And brought goods and help and counsel and advice. Israel was there in a minute.
Well, I think it's essential, and we're kind of winding down on time here a little bit, because the achievements not only in science and agriculture and technology are extensive, but also in the arts, and Israel continues to lead the way. However, there are many misconceptions about the state of Israel, and I want each one of you to have an opportunity to talk. If you had the opportunity to talk to a community at large and say, this is something that you really don't know about Israel, let me enlighten you. And Pastor, we'll start with you. What would that be one thing that you would like a community to know?
It's probably a number of things. I think one of the things that gets under my skin more than anything is when there is some conflict between Israel and Hamas. The way the world media reports it, you would think that Israel's picking a fight and just decided one day to attack or to shoot rockets in the Gaza Strip, when the reality is there are so many instances where it's initiated out of Gaza, and that really bothers me. I saw a bumper sticker the other day that described Israel as an occupier. That's not the case, and I would want the world to know that Israel, even in conflict, is generous and warns through mail, leaflets or text message. And I would encourage the world, if I could, if I had a big microphone, to know the facts and see what's really going on.
And that's a very good point. I think too many people see the headlines, or they'll catch a clip and they don't really know the background on things, or take the time to find out the background. Orna?
I would like to share with the people that are hearing us that they need to express support to Israel by actually going there physically and visit with the sites. The media sometimes intends to blow things out of proportion. It's safe to travel in Israel, of course, if you follow the rules. I will encourage people to go and visit Jerusalem, the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea. I think it's going to be a wonderful thing if people will just physically, not just talk, physically go and visit with all these interesting and historical sites.
And I mean, I think that's it's a wonderful point. I think that once you're able to contact, you can see that kind of energy and meet the people as well.
We have the best foods, the best restaurants. Go to Israel and eat falafel and hummus. My friend here can share with you that he went to the restaurant in the Armenian Quarter in Jerusalem.
I must have gained a lot of weight on my last trip to Israel.
Talk about the food, the beautiful women. Well, you're married, right?
I'm married. I already got a beautiful woman.
But it is. And the thing that that I think people should know is, despite all of these success and despite all of this beauty and despite all of this hard work and energy into making a state that is a refuge and a beacon to the world, despite all of that, is that Israel lives day to day threatened by its neighbors. And if it's not this neighbor this decade, it's another neighbor in another decade. And I can think of no other country over a 65-year period that has had to endure and persevere through this. Now, Rabbi, as a learned man, and you've got to look at this from a worldview, from a perspective.
My greatest concern is Israel is in the news a great deal. Israel is seen as the major military power in the Middle East. Israel, as Rich has described, has given so much to the world. The biggest problem I see is that those who don't know Israel think of Israel as some gigantic country, that if they're doing all of this, they must be a tremendous country. They're the great power in the Middle East. Israel's the size of New Jersey. New Jersey. Just think about that. That's what Israel is. And what it means to me is you've got to understand who and what Israel is and why she is so threatened. She's the size of New Jersey, and yet has done everything that she has done.
And I think people, if they have that perspective on this great power, I think it's because of the heart of the state of Israel. Sure. It's not necessarily the size; it's the heart.
Right.
And I think that's demonstrated. After every challenge that they rise. Now, Rich, we have a couple more minutes, and
so
I want to give you a moment. I want to give you a moment or so.
Well, here's what I say. Here's my deal. There's not another country in the world that would allow 12,000 rockets to be shelled on it and not go to war. If God forbid, Canada or Mexico shelled New York or Arizona with one rocket or two rockets, it would be crazed. And 12,000 over all these years. And yet, We want to be good citizens of the world, and we want to have peace. But the problem is the media, the UN. You know, UN is a disaster. There's 57 Muslim countries in the UN, and the truth of the matter is there's 1.6, you've heard me say this before, there's 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, and there's only 13 million Jews. And the Muslim population generally have the oil. And once again, I want to say there's a lot of wonderful Muslims. Okay, I'm talking about radical Islam that is the danger here. And I got to tell you, I'll say it again to our Christian friends and to our Jewish friends, stand up for Israel. We need Israel. Talk to your congressman. Write a editorial. Write the newspaper. Tell your friends. Send your kids to Israel. 2/3 of the visitors to Israel every year are Christian. They're not Jewish. Okay, it's like Orna said, it's a wonderful, safe, healthy, loving place. And they're the one friend of Israel that really appreciates us. When we go to Israel, they hug you in the streets. They're so happy to see you. So love Israel and you love America. That's what I say.
And the thing too, and you know, but I'd like for one or two of you to have a final comment, is that, you know, sometimes it's misunderstood. You know, when you see, you know, Hamas thing, it's in retaliation for this action or whatever. But America perceives things in sound bites. You know, they perceive things in that 30-second or 60-second little news story, and they don't really see the story behind that. And how many rockets have been cataloged that have fallen
12,000.
12,000 rockets have fallen on.
It's unbelievable.
On a country the size of New Jersey.
You know, we get caught up in, we major in the minor, in my opinion. And some people think that Hamas or any other group is mad at Israel because of a settlement or anything else, or something else like that. That's not what they're mad at Israel about. They're mad at Israel for existing, period.
That's exactly
and as
right.
long as Israel exists, Hamas, Hezbollah, Muslim Brotherhood will have a problem with it. And so that's what we have to combat. But, you know, one of the things that impressed me the most on my trips to Israel is the incredible resilience of the Israeli people. My pastor always says that when God is trying to get you to your promotion, trouble is the transportation. And out of all these conflicts, Israel just gets stronger and stronger. And I'm impressed with that, and I'm proud to stand with my friends, my Jewish friends.
And thank you for sharing. And one quick, brief comment from each one of you. What do you see for the future? And Orna, we'll start with you. What do you see for the future? Are you optimistic for peace?
I have to be honest and straightforward, like a typical Israeli. I'm not so optimistic, and I don't know exactly what's the what is the future holding for the state of Israel, but I'm not so optimistic. What I want to see is more support in America towards the state of Israel, and not just by words.
Pastor?
I'm concerned about the near future. I believe the near future is going to have some, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I'm optimistic that freedom, democracy will win out.
Rabbi?
I'm always optimistic.
That's good.
It's my nature. And when I look at Israel, I believe in Israel. I believe in what she does and what she says, how she acts. And I know that her people, joining with caring, believing people throughout the world, are going to join together, and Israel will survive and move forward.
Thank you.
Mr.
Bergman.
I think all of Israel's choices are not great. However, Israel has a lot of brain power. They have a lot of heart. They have a lot of resilience. And as long as the free world supports her, I think Israel will be all right. The Prime Minister of Canada is a great example. So we need more Prime Ministers of Canada here in this, and we need our administration to be like that. But I have to tell you, I'm afraid to be pessimistic. You know, I'm a Holocaust teacher, and we have got to stop this now. And we can do it by standing up with Israel.
Mr. Bergman, Pastor Kelvin, Orna, Rabbi Simon, I want to thank you taking the time to discuss this. And I would invite you back perhaps at another time, because I'd like to get a historical perspective on the state of Israel as well, you know, and the ordeals that Israel has gone through. And also, Orna, I would like to invite you back to talk, and perhaps with Mr. Bergman, to talk about the Holocaust as well, and why it's significant that those lessons learned are not forgotten. Again, thank you all for joining us on this very special edition of Up Close on METV. And thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next time on Manatee Educational Television.